All right, folks, it's Tuesday night, Tuesday, October 13th. Welcome to The Filter. This is episode number 64. We've done this 63 other times. This is the 64th time. The name of the show is Bitcoin Will Predict the Future. Yes, very exciting. I'm not sure if we'll make any predictions today, but we're going to learn how to do it. Maybe next week someone can implement everything they were talking about, and I'll start a prediction business. We shall see. Hey, Rob. Blair. All right. We've got a great show lined up for you today. Besides the idea futures and prediction markets, we got our own Rick Shreve is going to go through the numbers. Then we're going to go around the world as we sometimes do. We're going to visit Indonesia. There's stuff going on right here in Indonesia. There's Peru. Something interesting happened in Peru in the last week. And, of course, China. Seems like we're always going to China. They've got lots of things going on, and we're going to take a look. Our word of the day, it's actually two words, intelligent austerity. We'll take a look at intelligent austerity. Sounds like fun, doesn't it? And then we'll get on to the prediction market stuff. So let's go ahead and kick things off. I'm going to share my screen here so the folks at home can see what we got going on up on the screen up there. All right. High tech. Okay. So welcome to episode number 64. We're going to talk about prediction markets. But I just want to say, I want to thank all you guys for being here. We got a full house, and you know, it's really a blessing to have interesting, smart people to talk about this stuff with. And I'm really happy that that you guys are here. Thanks for coming. What are we up to here in Indonesia, in Bali? We're trying to build a Bitcoin economy. What you see here is a map of Bali, and we've got about 17 businesses in the Hubud area that accept Bitcoin, 17 down in the Kuta area. We're trying to improve that, right? There's not that many Bitcoin businesses to speak of, but we're actively trying to change that. We're trying to convince businesses to accept Bitcoin, and we're also trying to get individuals to walk around with Bitcoin on their phone and spend it. Why? Because, well, a topic that we often bring up in the meeting is how unfair and unsavory and problem-prone the current global financial system is. In our small way, here in our small little town, we can make a difference, and that's what we're trying to do. And that's what you guys are doing in a small way by coming to stuff like this. So if you're interested in helping, we're all ears. We're trying to I don't know, recruit some folks to get involved. So if you want to get involved, see me after. We're coming to you live from Hubud, the hub in Hubud. They provided us with this nice air-conditioned room. Is it cool enough for you, JP? Not quite yet. Okay, we're working on it. Yeah, they're kind enough to give us space to meet every week. They've been doing so for well over a year. And this is the place where we are. If you're listening online and you find yourself in Bali, then you should find Hubud on a Tuesday. We do it every Tuesday, rain or shine. Come join us. Come join us in person and get involved with what we're doing here. When we're not together in person, we've got this Bitcoins in Bali Facebook group, and we kind of crowdsource the news. If you find some good, juicy Bitcoin gossip or news or anything really, if it's related to Bitcoins or related to Bali or both, ideally, then post it, and we'll probably talk about it when we get together in person. So this is a group effort. Yeah, if you're not a member of the Bitcoins in Bali group, do drop by there and join us. Okay, local news. By popular demand, we're uploading just the audio of these recordings. Of course, it goes right up on YouTube after we're done every week, but we're trying to experiment with recording the audio as well. And we've got last week's up on SoundCloud. Thank you, Christine, for your help on that. And yeah, if you guys know of other platforms or want it on other platforms, let me know. We're trying to figure out how to do it, learning as we go. But last week's show is available in audio on SoundCloud. I'll post the link in the show notes. All right, so let's take a look at the price. Take it away, Rick.
All right, thanks, Gary. Just a quick run through the key numbers for this week. As we sit here right now, in rupiah, we're seeing at 3.26 million per Bitcoin. As you can see, we've had a fairly narrow range in Indonesia during the last week, which is actually a bit at odds with what's happening in the U.S. dollar market. We had a lot of volatility this week in the U.S. dollar Indonesian rupiah exchange rate as well, which I know Gary's going to talk about. 601 Bitcoins changed hands in the last 24 hours on this exchange. Not bad numbers, but not really much of a change in the last couple of weeks. Can we look at the U.S. dollar price, Gary? As we sit here right now, I believe I'm drawing a blank,
literally.
Yeah.
Hello. There we go.
There we go. We're sitting at 247.22. Yeah, that's correct. And what's interesting here is across the last week, since the last time we met, we've actually bumped up against the 250 barrier now for the fourth time today. And we just can't seem to pass through that point of, psychological resistance, whatever it is, to the $250 mark. So we keep bumping up against there. We do seem to have a glass ceiling we're not getting through right now. But realize if we look back across the 7-day period, realize 7 days ago we started out at 235. So we've put on a big gain in that period. Almost all of that happened on Monday. And then we just kind of bounced around in the over 240 range for the last few days. Looking pretty good for those of you who got in at the $150 mark. And it's actually been a pretty good month, all things considered. Let's go ahead and look at some other key numbers. Volatility, our volatility rate's really quite low right now, 1.21%. 60-day estimate, 2.84%, largely based on the volatility we saw after the, I don't know what we should call it these days, the revolution in blockchain decisions. Are we going to go 8-bit? Are we going to go 2-bit? 2 megabit or 8 megabit? What's it going to be? That really bumped up the volatility numbers, but it's all sort of stabilized now. And indeed, we're going to look in just a second at how the voting is going by the miners on that whole change in block size. So can we take a look at that? Is that next? Oh, no, we're getting network data next, don't we? Yeah, let's do the network data real quick. What's the current reward per block? Well, of course, it's 25 Bitcoin, which translates into $6,176. Wasn't very long ago we were below $6,000. So it's starting to get a little more profitable for the miners out there. No really startling numbers here. Average time for mining a block is a little long right now, 10 minutes and 30 seconds. That's a little higher than it has been the past few weeks. Average transactions per hour, 5,650. There's been really no change, no significant change in transaction per hour volume across the last week. It's all been fairly stable, yet we've seen an increase in pricing. Let's take a look at what's happening with that vote by the miners. That is, are we going to stay with the current system? Are we going to go BIP 101? Are we going to go with the 8 megabit? Are we going to go with BIP 100? Where are we? And right now, 60% of the mining power is invested in BIP 100. That's up about 2%, I believe, over where we were a week ago. Can you pop the 1 week graph up there? Maybe a little less than 2%. Yeah, it's up 1.5%. I exaggerated a bit. So slowly, we see the BIP 100 proposal starting to gather a majority. Obviously, it has a majority now, but we're still a long ways from where it needs to be the tipping point that makes the decision that this is the blockchain or the block size that we're going to have going forward. We're sitting here now mid-October. I guess if BIP 101 isn't adopted by the end of the year, I believe is what they were saying, then that one's pretty much considered to be de facto dead. Where will we be at that point if we don't have a majority or 90+% on BIP 100? I don't know. I guess we'll continue to stagger forward as the miners make their final decisions. But we're already seeing the BIP 101 adoption well under 1%, well under. So that one's really taking a huge hit.
It's interesting. This BIP 100 has to get to 90, I think, to tip. In second place is this default. But I've already experienced transaction problems during the when they were flooding the network with transactions.
Yeah.
So it'd be a pity if we just couldn't come up with a new proposal and just went with the default, and it kind of like died on the vine.
Well, I think I don't actually know what's going to happen, but I'm assuming that, if BIP 101 dies a de facto death at the end of the year, then it's just we're going to continue where we are right now, which is the miners slowly making a decision. Are we going to go with BIP 100? Or are we going to go with the default proposal? What's the case going to be? So it's really going to be sort of business as usual, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's really no different than what we've been seeing across the last 60, 90, 120 days. Has anyone heard anything to the contrary of that? No. I think it's just a bit of an embarrassment for the BIP 101 guys.
What's the number? Go back a month.
Sorry, I didn't hear your question.
Go back a month to see what the increase is. So 60% a month ago, and then went to...
Yeah. There's been a bit of fragmentation on this whole thing, I think, right?
But there's also...
I think some of the urgency seems to have died out as well. Sorry.
No, it's interesting. This is like the way they're showing it is the number of blocks that were mined by people running BIP 100 versus the number of blocks mined by people that are running old Bitcoin Core, and there's an element of chance in there as well. So
what's the block value across the last 24 hours? How many blocks? 84 blocks.
84 blocks.
Yeah.
So that's a smaller sample size. Actually, if you go back a month, you've got a larger sample size where you can. I think this is a.
Well, I mean, you take 84 blocks and you times it by 30, you can see the block volume is up actually. Even though the percentage share of the market is down, the block volume is up. That's probably just a reflection of the sheer number of blocks being processed at this point in time.
Okay.
So the jury's still out on this one, folks, but we do seem to be trending in a fairly consistent direction, which is the death of BIP 101 and the adoption of BIP 100.
We're keeping you guys up to date. Like, if Bitcoin's going to die, we'll tell you. That's what the slide's all about.
That smell? The last slide we're going to show you here is the VC activity, because there has been a little bit happening in the VC space since the last time I spoke with you about this. We've got 2 deals in October being reported. One of them was CoinPlug. Classification is the generic universal. They picked up $5 million. This is their second round, so they picked up 8.3 to date. You can see who's invested in that. I don't know where CoinPlug is located. Can you scroll to the right, Gary? You're going to have to scroll down and then scroll to the right, I guess.
Oh,
it's a big window. Grab your browser, scroll bar on the right.
There we go.
There we go. So CoinPlug is in Asia, South Korea.
Oh, both of those top guys are in Asia.
Yeah, and the other deal, which is Orb, is a financial services player. And if you look down that list of classifications, you can see the financial services sector has been getting the lion's share of the funding lately. They picked up 2.3 million. It's their second round. Their first round was a baby round. They call it the seed round, but they've already picked up some money already. Monex is in on this one, I see, which is interesting. And yeah, so the Asia ventures are starting to pick up a bit of cash and a bit of recognition. It's good to see. I wish I knew more about those companies. I'll try to do a little more research for you next time we get together and basically tell you a little bit more about what Orb and CoinPlug are up to.
Cool. Of course, after today's show, you'll be able to use prediction markets to know exactly which one will succeed, and you can invest appropriately. So don't go home early tonight. This is a good one. Okay. All right, guys. Thanks, Rick. All right. Well, let's go to Indonesia. This is the IDR USD cross. Have you guys noticed this? Do you ride around on your scooter like me and check the rates? Like just pick the place where you're gonna kind of like, and then when you drive by and yesterday it was 14 and then today it's 13. Do you like have a scooter accident? Yeah.
I keep an envelope in my safe that is for nothing but swapping back and forth between USD and rupiah.
Oh, really? Wow. That's cool. You need to teach us how to do that. I think I want to get in on that action. Well, somebody made money. Whenever you see a move like this, somebody's making some moolah. And you went. We were just looking at Bitcoin volatility for the last 60 days was 2-something%. The last 30 days, 1.2%. This is, I think, 5.9% on the rupiah. So it's interesting because one of the knocks on Bitcoin is the volatility. Like you can't do business with Bitcoin because today it's worth X and tomorrow it's worth X plus 5% or less 5%. But we're seeing this kind of movement in big time currencies. I mean, this is the latest incarnation, but we talk about this from time to time. The Swiss franc made a move like this. The Russian ruble made some moves like this. And this is not good for international business. This is very, very disruptive. If you can imagine, actually, this affected me because I was moving house and I didn't move my money before the rupiah became less valuable versus the dollar. And it cost me a couple $100. But imagine if you had a large international business, and through, it's a variable that you have no idea what's going to happen. It's just very, very disruptive, bad for business. All the things that people complain about Bitcoin about, they can complain about international currencies because it happens there too. So
if you've been to the market lately, you'll already see that imported foods is reflecting the fact that we had the bad exchange rate for a while, and imported food prices are all way up. Of course, now the rupiah is dropping way down, which of course makes them even more brutal for us.
Yeah, there should be some sort of lag. I wonder if they'll come back down. Or
no, probably not.
Yeah.
Not the way it usually works in Bali.
Well, it doesn't work like that. It doesn't come in.
Yeah.
Do you see the central bank rate of Swiss franc? It's negative. What?
Where?
There, bottom right, at the top. Central bank rates.
Right column.
Yeah, this one. I thought that was a Japan line. I didn't realize there were two columns there. Yes, negative interest rates. We talked about negative interest rates a little while ago. It is. It's interesting that they actually publish a negative interest rate because there's lots of banks that are doing it just by charging more and more fees. Like they're just figuring out how to charge you more for the bank account that you already have. But a negative published rate. Is anybody dying to go deposit their money in a Swiss bank? Negative interest rate. Why would they be able to do that?
Pretty sure there's no breaks in the monetary.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Well said. That's it.
So the negative interest rate, the banks borrow money and they get money for borrowing money from the central bank?
Well, that happens a lot in banking, actually. Yeah, I mean, they're charging you money if you give them money. Like if you have a deposit on an account with a Swiss bank, then next month you're going to have less money, all things being equal.
Yeah, no, I'm talking about from the central bank to the banks.
Oh.
From the central bank, the other banks borrow from the central bank, so they get money while borrowing money.
Well, I know that happens today in the United States with zero interest rate policy, and they're talking about trying to go negative in the States as well. And then if you're a bank, why money to someone who has a business idea when you can just borrow from the central bank overnight and make a few percent, like totally risk free. Yeah, it's a bad deal. All right, moving along. Let's go on to Lima, Peru. Does anyone know what happened in Lima lately? A meeting of the IMF, the World Bank, and basically all the bigwigs from the IMF and from the World Bank got together, and lo and behold, clouds will continue to hang over the global economy in the foreseeable future. All agreed. Anxieties over China's slowdown, weakening emerging markets, and the effects of the Federal Reserve's decision to hold steady on interest rates have done nothing to dispel them. So, the Fed made its decision not to raise rates, and we didn't really get to it in this meeting. But it's interesting watching it all kind of filter out into the world. I think that's why the rupiah came back. Because there was a flight from emerging markets when they thought that the Fed was going to raise rates, and now that they kind of surprisingly left rates the same, and the subsequent press conferences that they've had have been very dovish. Looks like they may not change rates until into next year. You can see the rupiah coming back to some normal level from like 6 or 8 weeks beforehand. But you can bet, I mean, the Fed's only going to go one way. They only got one direction to go, and that's up, and they talk about the need to do that. They haven't raised rates since 2006. Years and years and years we've had of this lowering interest rates. They've got to raise them at some point. So you, Rick, while you're riding around on your scooter, watch the Fed, because it's gonna go back the other direction when they start talking about raising rates again. No idea what will happen to the Bitcoin price, but the USD IDR spread should be affected. So it's a lot of doom and gloom here. The IMF cut its forecast for global growth this year from to 3.1 from 3.6, and I think Christine Lagarde also was on the bat phone with Janet Yellen before the last FOMC meeting, saying don't raise rates, and it's all due to this doom and gloom. Officials put on a brave face, repeatedly insisting that the world is broadly better prepared to weather the downturn than in the past. Many developing countries in particular have floated their currencies and built up huge foreign reserves to stave off a balance of payments crisis of the sort that regularly clobbered them in the 1990s. That was especially true here in Asia. The Asian contagion, 1997, 1998, a lot of people lost their shirts. But they go on to say that that's not really the problem. The problem is world trade is growing slower than global output. So imagine, you've got a big factory, you've got all this capacity, and the global economy is in a retraction. Like all natural things, economies grow and contract and grow and contract. We've been using monetary policy to stay on the growth path. Basically like, giving the patient cocaine, whenever he falls asleep, give him a little bit more cocaine, but eventually he's got to go to sleep. And it's interesting that they say they're better prepared than ever for a downturn because, at least the US has quadrupled its money supply since the global financial crisis, and they've held interest rates at zero. Those are their two policy mechanisms, and they're shooting blanks now. So I'm not exactly sure what will happen when the next recession hits, but it will. They always come. And now that central banks don't have as much ammunition, it's going to be exciting. Yeah, Tuesday night's going to be awesome. Probably like double the number of people in the room on that night. All right. Oh, here's our word of the day. Colombia is suggesting intelligent austerity in light of this slowdown. Raise taxes, cut spending, bigger deficits. That sounds like a great idea. Try to use intelligent austerity at your next cocktail party, and tell them you learned it here. Okay. All right, moving on. Oh, by the way, somebody went to Lima from the Bitcoin family and posted these all over town. It says, Bitcoin not screwing over developing countries since 2008. So hopefully some IMF bigwigs, when they were walking around, got a little Bitcoin advertising. Anyway. All right, let's go to China. China's international yuan payment system pursues world finance. Why is this interesting? Sometimes I look at these headlines and I'm like, how am I going to make this exciting? No wonder we only got forget it. Okay, so let's talk about why this is exciting.
New colors of Hershey Kisses. That's why.
Don't look over here, Johnny. We're over here. Yes, this is the Chinese being frustrated with the U.S. government's stewardship of the global financial system and the West's dominance over payment mechanisms. So if you've paid attention to payments at all, you probably know about SWIFT. You might have seen it on the back of your credit card. It's a payment network that allows payments to travel internationally. And the West has used it as a political tool. I don't know if you guys watch the news. I try not to, but it's inevitable. I know that there is political turmoil between Russia, China, and the United States, mostly in Syria, but also elsewhere. And it shows up. There's a conflict going on that doesn't necessarily have guns in China pointing at guns in the United States, but they fight over things like payment mechanisms, and they freeze people out or delay things for large international transfers. You do that long enough, and you force them to look for alternatives. And this is the manifestation of China looking for an alternative to the SWIFT network. So basically, they've got 19 banks on board. Some of them are not Chinese. You can see they're outside of China. Outside of Russia too, which you would expect. Deutsche Bank, HSBC, one of the big four banks in Australia, and they're operational. They said they would be operational before the end of the year, and they're early. It's still October, and they're ready to go. They've already transferred like payments as large as $5 million, and they're just getting going. So this is a repudiation of the dollar system, dollar hegemony around the world, and this will create less demand for U.S. dollars. So those $3.5 trillion that we printed over the last few years, there's going to be less demand for those, which means inflation in the United States, and we like to export our inflation, so it's probably going to show up elsewhere. So stay tuned. Any questions on that? All right, no more China. All right, that brings us to our topic of the evening: prediction markets, wisdom of crowds. What is this stuff? I'm just going to play a short clip for you. Hopefully this will play to just kind of set the stage. One of my favorite shows is Radiolab, and they did this thing a while back. It's really well done, and will give us a little bit of context.
Radiolab is supported by Lagunitas Brewing. Crowds were everywhere in the streets.
You really see this enormous backlash, in large part in reaction to the rise of democracy.
This is James Sherwicki, author of the book The Wisdom of Crowds, and he's talking about the people on the other end of the riots, the intellectual elite.
Look at people like Thomas Carlyle, Gustave Le Bon, France, Nietzsche, obviously. For all these people, crowds were really the epitome of irrationality and stupidity.
But that was about to change. He tells this story of a guy named Sir Francis Galton.
Yeah, Sir Francis Galton, who's this sort of famous British scientist, and is actually most famous because he was the founder of what we now know as eugenics.
Wow, is that so?
Yeah, he's sort of a notorious elitist. And what's funny is that this is a story about him finding the opposite of his basic assumptions to be true.
The story goes, on a nice fall day in 1906, Sir Francis Galton, a guy who truly believed that only the better classes should be allowed to vote, rule, or even have children, he decides to spend the day in the country.
Ladies and gentlemen, step right this way, right this way.
At the county fair.
Right over here. Now, this is going to be quite an experience for you, young man.
The thing that caught Galton's attention that day was a competition involving an ox.
So right this way, you might want to avoid that unfortunate plot right there, madam. Here, no, pass over, really. Now, what I want you to do is I want you to examine this very fat ox. Don't touch it, boy. We don't touch the ox. What we do is we look at the ox and we weigh it in our mind. Yes, in your...
You know, the group was a really diverse crowd. Family members, local merchants.
Most of whom were not experts at all in weighing oxen.
Young lady, you know how to weigh a package, don't you?
Of course I do. I carry luggage from time to time.
Well, if you can weigh a package, then you can weigh an ox. Here's how you do it. You take, I don't know, a couple of packages and put them in your head. You say, well, this ox seems to be about 70 packages. So multiply the weight of a package by 70.
I think they paid 6 pence, and they would, you know, make their guess. And the people that had the best guesses would win prizes.
Large cash prizes.
So quite a few people guessed. There's something like 800 people, close to 800.
And while none of those 800 or so people guessed the exact weight of the ox, prizes were awarded. People went home. But the ever-inquisitive Sir Francis hung around.
After the contest was over, Galton went up to the organizer.
Well, would you mind telling me?
He said, can I have the guesses?
If I take possession of all 787 tickets.
You know, the slips they had written the guesses on.
All right, you can have them, I suppose. I don't see anything wrong with that. But why? Because I'm wondering something.
See, Sir Francis figured these common people wouldn't have a clue. Most of them were overwhelmingly uninformed and unexpert in bovine matters, and he just assumed that if you added up a lot of uninformed, unexpert individual opinions, you'd get a very uninformed, unexpert group opinion. That's what he was counting on.
One of the things he did was he just calculated the average guess.
That is the midpoint, the mean of all the guesses. He figured they'd be way off. But when he did that, it turned out that collectively, the citizens of Plymouth said the ox weighed
1,187 pounds.
1,187 pounds.
How peculiar.
Which was astonishingly close.
The ox's actual weight was 1,188 pounds.
Wow, so they're a pound off?
They were basically perfect.
Mm.
And they were actually better than any single individual in the group.
Galton was stunned.
Did you?
This went against everything he knew to be true. But
You have to give him credit.
because he did publish the results,
He was, curious enough to acknowledge possibilities.
All right. I'll leave it there. It's a great episode if you want to check out Radiolab, or if you've ever, I mean, they've got lots and lots of topics they cover in a really great way. Please check them out. It's one of the coolest things on earth. But this introduces the topic of the wisdom of crowds, which is really what we're getting to when we're talking about prediction markets. And it's interesting that in this story, there was also an economic incentive. Each of those people paid 6 pence in order to guess. So, and that's an aspect of these prediction markets that I think makes them very interesting, and also very dangerous. The government has shut some of these things down. So let's take a look at some of these things, and we'll bring you along from just the idea of it to its implementation in the Bitcoin world, and even a totally decentralized implementation. So let's see what we've got next. I'm trying to get here, but let's come here first. So prediction markets. Prediction markets, also known as information markets, decision markets, idea futures, event derivatives, are exchange-traded markets created for the purpose of trading the outcome of events. The market prices can indicate that the crowd thinks the probability of what is the probability of the event. A prediction market contract trades between 0 and 100%. It is a binary option that will expire and at the price of 0 or 100. So essentially what it's doing there is it's giving a large group, hopefully it's a large group, the ability to bet on the outcome. Obviously, if they're using real dollars, then they've got some skin in the game, and this can pay off the people that are right and give you an answer to a question, which is the bigger thing there. Seems like a great idea. What could go wrong? Have you guys heard of this stuff already? Have you seen these things? Are you familiar with this idea?
I used to live in Vegas.
Well, we've got the futures market, and we actually on a previous episode we had one of our guys buy a futures contract for Bitcoin, and that's kind of the same thing. If you buy a futures contract, you're basically betting on what the value of Bitcoin will be in the future, right? And somebody's got the other side of that contract. There's a winner and a loser, and each of you are making a bet, and there's an aftermarket for that bet. So over time, the value of that bet can change based on the how likely the thing is to happen or not happen, right? If you buy a Bitcoin future for $100 and then Bitcoin looks like it's going to be $200 at the end of the contract, then that changes the price of that contract, and there's a secondary market for those things. But in the meantime, it tells you what's going on. It makes a prediction about the future. So we've already really talked about this, although we didn't call it prediction markets back in the day. So how are they using these things? This is a nice lady from Iowa. She's only going to talk for a minute, but check this out.
So here in Iowa, we're all about politics. George Gallup was a student here, forecasted election outcomes with polls. And the Tippy College of Business, we forecast election outcomes too, but we use markets. And just like a farmer could go trade corn futures, our traders come in and trade vote futures because they come to our market armed with information. That means our prices aggregate that information and forecast election outcomes. We don't just use the markets to forecast election outcomes, we use them as our research laboratory. So we can go in and ask, what is it that makes our markets accurate? Doesn't matter. If a trader comes in that's biased, does that affect the market price? Is there a better way to build a market? Is there a better way to build a forecast tool? And we've found over time that our markets predict better than polls. The further you get away from the election, the better the market predicts. And I find this just fascinating research.
So this is one of the earliest incarnations of this idea, and there's no actual money being traded, I don't believe, on this electronic market, but there's points or something, and they give away prizes. So there's something of value being exchanged, and it's interesting that we still rely on polls and polling for our elections. Exit polls are the things that they always report on the news. But they're using in Iowa these prediction markets, basically allowing people to bet so that they can see who, when people really put their money where their mouth is, what's possible in terms of prediction. Didn't in Australia they had a recent election where the polls were all wrong? I seem to remember reading something. That was England. Yeah.
Do you have any idea what sort of sample size they are shooting for when they run these markets?
I don't know, but I know that that's a problem. It has the same problems that regular markets have. A lack of liquidity means that maybe you get the wrong answer. It's also subject to bubbles, which markets are also subject to, and manipulation. So you've highlighted some of the downside, right? Maybe we're not going to be able to predict that venture capitalist like we thought. Let's see what else we got here. Okay, so that was that Iowa electronic dealing in money. Neither was this one, the Hollywood Stock Exchange. This guy Max Kaiser. Ever seen him on TV? Okay, he's crazy. He's obviously on drugs, or maybe he's just naturally high. But he is entertaining. I'll give him that. And productive. One of the things that he created was this Hollywood Stock Exchange, which basically allows people who are interested in Hollywood to vote in a prediction market, bet essentially on the gross revenues of movies, whether a movie will be successful if it has a certain actor or not. And the Hollywood industry has come to rely on this. Where is it? I thought I had it. Anyway, I thought I had it pulled up the actual exchange, but I apologize. Anyway, it's a working website. It's actually there, and it's a profitable entity because the studios pay for this information, and they float an idea like I don't know, some heartthrob is going to be the next lead in 50 Shades of Grey #2. And then they see how the market reacts, and then if it doesn't look like it's happening, then they make a different choice, which is fascinating. The other fascinating thing about the Hollywood Stock Exchange is they're creeped in an actual market for these portfolios. So if you were a person that had a very productive portfolio of stars and movies and outcomes, they were putting these things up on eBay. So people were selling their portfolios up on eBay and turning them into real money. And that's when the Securities and Exchange Commission got involved and, I don't know, wrote them a few letters, or I don't know, showed up, or I don't know what happens when that happens. It's definitely not good. But
somebody who just handles Max.
Yes, hopefully Max was not involved in those negotiations. That couldn't have gone well. But I think it's interesting that there's, like, money just wants to get involved. Like, money is just trying to find a way to get involved in these things. It's almost, I don't know if it's human nature to want to gamble or what, but it's interesting that a byproduct of this gambling is this prediction thing, this prediction mechanism that can allow people to make decisions. Let's look at the next thing here. Okay, InTrade. This was another decision market that came into being. Let's see. Let me just read a little bit here. A web-based trading exchange whose members traded contracts between each other on the probabilities of various events occurring. After having been forced to exclude U.S. traders in 2012, then on 10th of March 2013, InTrade suspended all trading, citing possible financial irregularities. Basically, the regulators showed up and shut these guys down, but they were very successful before that. And some of these guys that started InTrade have gotten involved in some of the projects that I'm going to tell you about in just a few minutes. But you can still go to InTrade, and it doesn't look like there's a lot of stuff going on there. Announcements coming soon. At least they have the 2015 up here. Anyway, it's kind of a big idea, and it's kind of, I don't know, I feel like it's kind of a pity when, you know, something's useful for a group of people, and then the referees come in and say, you know, game over.
One of the issues with InTrade, and I'm not naming any names here, but during the last Obama election, you know, you were able to go in and you were able to buy contracts based on outcomes, not only simply win or lose, but margins, sort of like point spread, right?
Mm-hmm.
They had a forum, and so what would happen is you would get these trolls that would go into these forums, and they would just, you know, scream and holler about a candidate, and they would just, you know, and it would start to tip purchases of contracts. And it was a way that you could watch, and if you were willing to stay cool, you could use that as a way to leverage your bets and know when to double down. The suspicion always was that some of those guys were not actually who they appeared to be, that they were actually in there simply fanning the fires to increase trade volume from the gullible. And that was a big part of the problem with InTrade.
Yeah, well, this is what happens on global financial markets all day, every day.
But with a much smaller pool,
right.
It's
so
much easier to incite the nutcases.
It's easier to push around.
Yeah.
But this, I think, is a real, I mean, I don't know how humanity solves this problem, but this is a real problem. There's the people that have the facts and trade on the facts, and in the case of prediction markets, they can profit if they're really tuned in with the facts. But then you've also got this herd mentality that could be like the tail wagging the dog. If there's enough of a herd, it could change the reality, even though someone with all the facts, you know.
The election was so polarizing. It was a really great event to see that dynamic occur, because people were so emotionally involved with their candidate and their political agendas.
Right.
It's like, you know, we're not going to let Obama win, you know, and so it's like time to double down on Obama.
Yeah. Well, it's an interesting indictment of the idea, though, that you know, you can, if you're going to defer to the crowd in terms of making your decisions, you've got these vulnerabilities around the herd mentality, or people trying to manipulate markets, or you know, and we're not talking about you know, small things. We're talking about elections and things like that. So yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure if I'm on board or not, or what I really think. Now, we haven't really talked about cryptocurrency yet, and does anybody have any idea how cryptocurrency could play a role in this, or why you'd want to even introduce cryptocurrency?
Assassination markets.
Assassination markets. Yes.
There's a Kickstarter for that.
What was your name again? Yeah, well, that's an interesting point. Actually, you know, it's interesting if enough, like, let's say that you're betting on whether American Airlines will be hijacked next year, you know, and then there becomes a financial incentive to actually make that happen. That's a legitimate criticism of these markets as well. And they've had like death pools as well. I've seen those on the internet where you bet on whether or not people will die. There's even, for a time, there were secondary markets for life insurance policies, if you can imagine that.
Sounds pretty actuarial.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's actuarial until somebody gets your name and knows there's $1 million contract, insurance contract, and they can buy it on a secondary market. So that existed for a time. I don't know if anyone actually got killed, or, you know, but it's kind of scary when you think that if there's money riding on an outcome, do people with inside information make it happen? You know, it's quite well known that there was a lot of futures trading in advance of 9/11. In fact, that's one of the ways that they tried to investigate the 9/11 occurrence, because there was like 6 sigma difference in futures contracts short American Airlines and United Airlines. But in the end, they decided that they couldn't prosecute anybody because they couldn't tell who was in the herd and who actually knew that something was going to happen. But it is there. It is, the red light was flashing. The prediction market was saying something's going to happen to United Airlines, something's going to happen to American Airlines. Well, we weren't it's a different world now. They're probably paying attention to such things. So, anyway, let's see what we got next. Okay, so open question: why do we need cryptocurrencies for this? Well, I talked about several outfits that either got hassled or shut down. And what do we need cryptocurrencies for? Well, it's anti-censorship, I like to call it. What if you could create an autonomous prediction market that just existed out in the world? That's what people are talking about using Ethereum for. Are you guys familiar with Ethereum? Ethereum is a decentralized Turing-complete computer language that runs out on the internet on its own blockchain. And therefore, you can deploy things to this amorphous blockchain-based computing system, and the thing can in principle at least, can't be shut down. So you can run things like a prediction market that transcends jurisdiction, right? It lives on the internet. It lives in the internet jurisdiction, which good luck trying to police that. A lot of bad things happen on the internet, and so far it's still working. So yeah, this is an interesting quandary. This is a blog post by Vitalik. You guys know this guy, Vitalik Buterin, and he's talking about futurarchy, and he's talking about a different use case. He doesn't get into too much detail on the decentralized nature of Ethereum, but he's talking about deploying these kinds of prediction markets on the Ethereum platform. And this is a kind of an interesting use case that he shows. He's actually advocating that companies can use this internally to make decisions. So he's calling this a futurarchy, and he's saying, well, in this case, it's within, like, say, the United States. Choose a metric like GDP and a maturity duration 10 years, and then create a market for a proposal like bail out the banks. So you ask the population, do we bail out the banks? Then you create a market for the yes token and a market for the no token. And you do that over a set period of time. So you give everybody in the United States like a month to answer this question. Should we bail out the banks or should we not? And the market for the yes token and the market for the no token find their level after a certain period of time. And then if the yes is higher than the no, then you bail out the banks. If the no is bigger than the yes, then you don't bail out the banks. And that's how you've made your policy decision.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Is it actually asking, should we bail out the banks, or is it asking, will we bail out the banks during the time period?
It's saying, should the U.S. government bail out the banks, yes or no? Like, they're trying to make a policy decision. Like, are we going to do it or are we not? So then they have their decision. Let's say that I can't remember what he decided. Is that 24 and that's 26? Okay, so the no token is larger. So that's the decision. All of this money reverts back to the people who bought it, and then the no token is kept. And then when there's an outcome, like if the GDP is higher than 26 trillion 200 billion, then they pay out. It gets paid out to the people who actually made that bet. So it's like buying stock in a decision. Well, first of all, it gives you an answer, like what should we do, right? And then if it ends up being true, then the people who made that correct decision get paid. So it's fascinating, I think, and you'll have to read more in order to get more of the nuance around it. You can actually imagine, especially if it was running in a decentralized way, that the population of the United States could actually vote autonomous to the Congress, right? Let's say that there was a question like, should we pull out of Iraq? Like, you could get an undeniable answer from the entire population of the United States that the United States government could not censor. So you get, do we have representative democracy? Like, what does the Congress say, and then what does this prediction market say? It's kind of a interesting question. These things don't exist yet, but they're feasible. And
kind of like deep democracy, right? So like you're getting all these micro decisions or individual rather representative decision makers. You're getting individual decisions being made by the public, and you're using financial markets to provide a not only like a financial like prediction. You're actually using financial markets as an incentive for someone to vote on maybe a small issue they might not even be interested in. But you know, like if we were to have a democracy where all the decisions were given out to everybody, not everybody would be interested in it, right? But people who are would be motivated because it's popular.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and you know, the people who study this from an academic standpoint explore all of those nuances. Like, you know, what if people were paid to vote in a certain way, or what, you know, and what happens is if you get enough momentum towards the wrong decision, there are enough well-informed people that want to profit from that disparity that jump in and get involved. You know, everybody's saying, you know, Hillary Clinton's going to win, when you know that she's, you know, I don't know, going to withdraw or something. You've got some specialized information that corrects itself in these prediction markets according to the ivory tower. I don't know how these things work in practice, but I think we're, you know, in our lifetime, we're going to see some of this stuff to come to fruition. Some of these, the viability of these things, I think, will be tested, and it's fascinating. You know, but it goes back, you know, there. I think, was it Winston Churchill said something like, everybody believes in democracy until they have an encounter with an everyday citizen or something like that. He was like, he was like really, I don't know. And then he would say, you know, democracy's, you know, not great, but there's nothing better or something along those lines. But, you know, it's interesting. If you remember the first thing that I played about the weight of the cow, even though you've got uninformed people in the market, do we still arrive at the correct answer? Even though, can we accommodate all the people that are ill-informed because it's profitable enough to find the right answer, and markets will decide, make the right decision.
The impact is quite different, you know, between how much does this ox weigh and should we pull out of Iraq? It's very significant.
Yes, yes. But do you think that that qualitative difference means that the prediction market might not work as well?
We don't know, do we? That's Churchill's
There'd
point.
certainly be more incentive to rig the market, to try and create that herd effect.
And why not purchase it? Well, it'll be more expensive than in a Congress.
Well, this is another reason why you want the decentralization, because then it's incorruptible as well, or it works on a set of rules. Well,
you can still buy a troll. You can still always buy a troll.
Right, right. You can't. The underlying technology would be disinterested, but yeah, you can socially engineer what's happening. Yes, good point. All right, so this futurarchy idea was something that this guy Robin Hanson came up with, and there's a whole long treatment of the topic, which I will not play for you, but you can check it out yourself. I'll put the link in the show notes. Interestingly enough, he makes a point that a similar point to something we were talking about when we were talking about use cases, and that is that even though it's technically possible to do these prediction markets, there are lots and lots of soft reasons why they don't work. And this is a proponent for the idea of prediction markets. I think he's run across a lot of practical problems trying to make it happen. So that's a really good interview. There are several new companies that are trying to make a name for themselves in this space. One of them is this company Augur. These guys have been all over Reddit and in the news. I'm sorry to say I don't know much about them, but if you're interested in this topic and want to take a look at this company Augur. Imagine an early warning system for everything. That's pretty audacious. Yeah, what a weird world we live in if as soon as Obama, you know, whoever the Obama is 20 years from now, announces candidacy and you automatically knew he was going to win. Like, what if we live in that world where somebody announces something like, hey, I've got a new company. Well, it's going to fail. How about this idea? No. Or, you know, I don't know. It's hard to imagine it. There's some equilibrium where the prediction and the final outcome can't meet in a single moment, right? But what's that? Yeah, maybe so. Well, you know, what's interesting on that point is we've already seen this happen with Hollywood, right? Because Hollywood is like trying to make their decisions based on what everybody wants, and if you go to them with a this is why who was the famous director that was such a loner? Stanley Kubrick. Yeah, he was like, I don't want anybody like messing with me at all ever. You know, if it takes me 6 months to do one scene, I'm going to do it. And he was powerful enough to do it. He was a true artist. But these days, like, you know, if you're a studio executive and you're working on these prediction markets, you're turning out the lowest common denominator, and I think that's the danger.
It's really a good thing if you're making products, for example, that, you know, to talk to your market and find out what they want and make them a product that they want.
Yes.
But that it's extensible to all aspects of our lives is a question.
I would actually narrow that down. It's a good thing if you're talking about a commodity product.
Right. Yeah.
Right. But if you're trying to like invent the new iPad or
Something like boutique.
yeah, maybe you get shot down by the bureaucracy before you. Yeah.
He thought he was smart than what everyone else was to be able to create a vision around his product, which is pretty great.
Right.
If you've got only relying on prediction markets, and you're relying on the common denominator rather than shooting for our ears.
How many disruptive technologies that were successful weren't successful at the outset?
Right.
None.
Yeah.
That's what we're trying.
Well, and you know, Jobs. Good that you mentioned him. He had this thing called the reality distortion field, where they mentioned this in his biography, where he would show up and like he'd meet with the engineers and he'd be like, this board is too big for the power supply I want, so redesign it overnight. And they'd be like, we can't redesign this overnight. And he'd be like, show me it in the morning. And like they would actually accomplish this thing that they thought was impossible. And there's like story after story after story about that. So I think prediction markets would have predicted failure and we wouldn't have those things. So you're right. It's leadership and art that might die if we rely too much on the machines.
It explains why most of the movies coming out of Hollywood these days are just awful.
Well, you know, most of them. Thanks, Max.
I'll blame Michael Bay.
Well, you know what they do is they just have a rehash of something that was successful once before. Like they'll redo the Smurfs, or I don't know.
We need another Transformers.
Yes, another Transformers. Transformers 7. James Bond. Bring it on. All right. There that tomorrow night I'm going to do something a little different. I'm going to broadcast an interview with the one of the folks involved with this Fairlay company. So at the tomorrow night I'm going to have another Google Hangout where I'm going to interview this guy. This guy has a successful Bitcoin prediction market, and he's started to encounter some of the problems that InTrade encountered. So I'm hoping to get some interesting information about that. And he's also involved with this company, Group Gnosis, which is a prediction market developed for Ethereum. So in principle, this could be an incarnation of this decentralized prediction market. So instead of one that, you know, he should have an interesting perspective because he's run one that was centralized and now he's working on one that's decentralized. I'm going to talk to him at 5 p.m. tomorrow night. I'll publish the link on the Google Hangouts and it'll go up on YouTube afterwards so you can check it out after the fact as well. So check that out.
Sports betting?
Yes, there is sports betting.
Does this kind of work like Bitcoin?
I'm not sure. If you have any questions that you want me to ask, let me know and I'll get them in there.
Can you tell us a little bit more about it?
I don't know a whole lot. I'm going to get to it when I talk to him. But there is sports betting. Here's Ecuador versus Bolivia. Why don't you put some bets up tonight, Johnny, and you can give us a report next week.
There was an interesting occurrence this last couple of months with this new, hard to say if it's betting or not, sports trend of daily fantasy sports. It's become a $1 billion industry overnight, and now it's like advertising nonstop and boosting viewership in the NFL even more, which is already by far the most dominant sport in America. And there was a scandal because they were suspected of some of the employees taking the information and then putting in their own teams based on it. But of course, the way it works, they actually want to bet differently than everyone thinks, because if everyone thinks one way, it's like the Ox thing, and if everyone bets the same players, it's like choose a lineup. If everyone bets the same players, none of them can win. So like you go and bet guys that no one's betting, right? And then you can win. And if the other guys do well, no one wins.
Yes, so there's what that's called insider trading. Mm-hmm. It's the second oldest profession, I think.
Right now they're saying it's not gambling, but it's only 2 years old, so now they might get.
No, that's fascinating. Maybe we should talk about that.
Yeah.
That's cool. All right, guys, that's all the time we have. Like I said, we do this every Tuesday night, rain or shine, here at Hubud, 5 p.m. local time in Bali. Come join us in person or get involved with the Facebook group, and we'll see you next week. Thanks for coming.
Thanks, Gary. Good show.
Um,